and welcome to today's Ascent 360 Marketing Shot, which asks the question, how to crush Q4. And we have some advice, and it's about focusing on your best customer, on your best customers. Scott, who is from Merkle and Experian, and really fostered the growth of global brands such as Nike, Disney, Royal Caribbean, to mention a few. But Scott's vision is to bring Fortune 500 level marketing tools to businesses of all sizes. So from that lens, Scott, please share your experience of how incredibly valuable it is for brands to focus on their best customers.
All right, thank you, Christy. Appreciate you having me join today. Yeah, so it's actually a lot of fun to talk about high value customers because it really is so substantial. When we build customer data platform for our clients, the chart that you see here, this kind of percent of sales by monetary quintile, is in every database. And it almost looks exactly the same every single time. And when I mean it looks exactly the same, I mean that around 80% of revenue is coming from 20% of customers. And we see this across our client base. I think we've probably seen it about as high as 90%. And we've seen it maybe as low as 72% or maybe 68%, but never much different than that. And it's kind of amazing if you think about it, that when you're running a business, somehow or another, the top customers repeat at whatever business it is, in whatever industry. This is across retail, it's across e-commerce, it includes hospitality, resort, travel, ski, and we see the same sort of idea. And that is that, hey, you've got some really, really valuable customers, and they're driving most of your revenue. So I think it's always worth taking a pause and saying, what does it mean when you say that, and what do you do about it? And I think the first thing that I would ask is, well, what are you doing about it, right? Are you treating those 20% of customers like they probably should be treated, if in fact they're supporting most of your business? So if in fact, you look at the kind of the donut there with the little blue piece, where 0.5% is 20% of 0.5% of revenue is being driven by 20% of customers, and 76% is being driven by, or 73% is being driven by 20% of your customers, then you'd say, well, you could lose that bottom 20% without a problem at all, right? You probably wouldn't notice if you lost the bottom 20% of your customers, but if in fact you lost your top 20%, then you're in tremendous peril. So I think the beginning with is we just say, well, let's treat them differently. Let's speak to them from a stance of appreciation. Let's send thank yous, those sorts of things. And I'll probably start with an example that one of our retailers executes upon, and that is they send a high value thank you. So when someone makes a purchase, they send a post-purchase, but that post-purchase, a decision is made before it's sent, and that is if they spend over a certain amount, I think if their lifetime spend is over a certain amount, then they get a high value thank you. The high value thank you, it actually has the name and phone number of the store manager. And it says something like, we thank you, appreciate your business. I'm the store manager here at, retailer's name, and, don't hesitate to call me. And that doesn't matter if they buy something for $30 or if they buy something for $1,000. It's that they know that customer is a high value customer, and they treat them accordingly. If anybody else comes in and buys, a candy bar or something else, but they haven't, they don't qualify as a high value customer, then they get just a regular thank you email.
So the first step is to identify your high value customers? How do you do that?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of methods, but the the core of it ends up looking something like spend or customer lifetime value. So if you include gross margin or margin percent in it, then you're probably going to look at something like a lifetime spend. You'll probably have some sort of calculation that might even estimate what they may be worth. But let's include the idea of spend. Let's also include the idea of recency, and that is how recent it is that they made a purchase. And then let's also include the idea of frequency, and that is how frequently they've made a purchase. Now those things can all get folded along with a lot of other metrics into a customer model, right? And that customer model it can be a predictive model, or it can be a model that simply states, are they a high value customer or not. You tend to need a customer data platform if you're going to want to build some models around high value customers or high value prospects. But you're going to use those sorts of metrics to help decide if someone is high value.
And then as you mentioned, design a number of campaigns or plays that treat them differently, like the example you used.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. So we've got kind of a limitless number from clients who act on this data. We do have a ski resort that recently sent a thank you to high value season pass holders, and specifically they looked at pass holders who had spent over a certain amount. I think it might have been $20,000 lifetime, and had been a customer for 5 years or more. When you think about someone who spends that much money and does it for a long period of time, you probably have some sense of what that individual's relationship is with the mountain. It probably means their kids are growing up on the mountain. It probably means that mountain is just a really important part of their life. And so the thank you that you're sending, this isn't typically just a marketing piece. It isn't just to say, hey, buy more. And in the case that I'm talking about, the email was actually sent as a mass email, but it came from the owner of the mountain, and it was enabled such that individuals could reply directly to the owner of the mountain. There weren't that many people within the audience that made it overwhelming, but the owner of that mountain specifically wanted to say, hey, I really appreciate your business. You're like family to me, and I know the mountain feels like family to you.
Do you think one of the most fascinating things that you mentioned was this idea of recency?
Yeah.
That your most recent customers are more likely to buy.
Yeah.
Which is, all of these things are really interesting because as a marketer, it's really about flipping the funnel. I spend a lot of time focusing on customer acquisitions, where what you're saying is, especially when you show that donut, oh my gosh, I need to be paying more attention to these people with the 555s,
yeah.
RFM scores.
Yeah, that's right. So a lot of this is unintuitive, but is accurate across every business we've run into, and that is that a recent customer is the most likely customer to buy again. You might even back up and just start with an idea that if you've got a customer, they're 7 times more likely to buy than a prospect, and that these are metrics that actually come from the White House. I'm actually not remembering the source exactly, but it is a source within the White House, within their kind of commerce unit. But so we know that a customer is 7 times more likely to buy than a prospect. So you'd say, well, look, if you're going to send an email to one customer, an email to prospects, you might get the same result. and therefore your bang for your buck certainly starts talking to the customer. But then even when you're talking about customers, like not all customers are created equal, or all customers are equal, but they're not exactly equal. What we know is that the recent customer is going to spend a lot more and is going to make a purchase very quickly. So within our clients' database as well, we tend to show something like days between repeat purchase. And that is, if a purchase is made, how long is it on average before a repeat purchase is made by that same person? And it turns out across all our databases, it averages about 40% of repeat purchases happen within 30 days, and about 60% happen within 90 days. So if 60% of repeat purchases are going to happen within within 90 days, then you know where your next dollar is coming from. Your next dollar is coming from 60% of the time a current customer who actually just made a purchase from you.
Can you look at that data across households too? For instance, husband buying something for the wife, or the wife buying something for the husband?
Yeah, absolutely. And it looks very similar. So our database actually does, our database actually does, I'm sorry, my computer just tried to start a meeting. So our database actually does household individuals. So we know who are in households, and we know who are individuals. And we also know residences, because household formation just looks different than it did 20, 30 years ago, right? You've got a lot of roommates, you've got a lot of other kind of partner arrangements. But nonetheless, when you look at the data at the household level, it looks very similar, that a recent purchase will be made again by someone who just made a purchase. And even to tell a kind of fun story about this, on some level, it actually stretches over to the housing unit itself. So we know that it happens that we will send a direct mail piece on behalf of one of our clients to a household where someone just moves, right? We do all the national change of address, but within a couple of days, you'll still find some people who get it, that they know the person who was supposed to receive it no longer lives there. And amazingly, the person who now lives in that house will still make purchases from those catalogs. So it's and you argue that this is probably because of demographics and income, and the sort of person who lived in that house before might look a lot like the person who lives in it now. But it is fascinating statistics.
So looking at your top customers, so identifying them and then really customizing those messages, how deep with that personalization can you go with your high value customers?
Yeah, I think you start as basically as you need to, right? And I'd suggest saying, well, let's just start by talking to our high value, high frequency, high recency, or whatever model you have. Let's talk to them. But then it does make a lot of sense to start breaking down your messaging to speak to individuals on a more personal basis. So I think you see an example on the screen of an email that might go out to a family that looks different than a mature individual, that looks different than a young millennial. And doing that will make will have ROI improvements. And a good example of this is gender specific creative. So we have for clients done tests where we send gender specific creative to the gender that we know. So we send female creative to females, we send male creative to males. And of course, to test this, we also send a random set of male creative to females and female creative to males. And what we see through that is that females who receive female creative have a higher conversion rate than females who receive male creative. And the same is oppositely true, right? That males receiving male creative have a higher conversion than males receiving female creative. And the numbers are compelling, and that is to say that females receiving female creative on average convert about 18% higher than the counterpart. And that doesn't mean that they're converting at 18%. It just simply means that if the conversion was going to be 3%, then it's 18% higher than 3%. And in the studies we did or we've done, that's about what it looks like. And it expands the further you go. We know that if in fact you get an email that is based on some behavioral action you've taken, browse abandonment, or because you made a purchase, the open and click rates are often double what a sort of ad hoc email might look like, right? So a typical open rate for retail these days is looking more and more like, I don't know, between 15 and 22%. And a typical behaviorally driven automated or triggered email will often have open rates 50 to 65% or something like that, right? So often a little bit better than double. And really all you're doing when you do that is sending a personalized communication, right? You're sending personalized based on their behavior, but the same thing is true if you personalize based on gender or another sort of persona element. And there's this, once you have a CDP, you've got literally hundreds of these to choose from.
Well, I would think it would be a must-have for your high-value customers. So
absolutely.
Well, any additional tips and tricks for talking to your high-value customers?
No, I think that the most important part is just to start, acting upon the vision. It's your customers actually expect it and they want it. The idea today of having a newsletter list because someone subscribed and just send them a weekly or monthly newsletter is really beyond passé. It doesn't work. You're not talking to an individual and you're not basing it on anything. It's the equivalent of mass marketing from the 1950s. Let's just call it mass marketing from the 2000s.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Scott. I learn something new every day as a marketer. And so to crush Q4, people, spend a little love on your best customers. Thank you again. And with that, we will close this Ascent 360 shot.
All right. Thank you, Christy.